I'm Stuart Varney, and this is My Take. Well, this headline caught our attention. Duke University professor steps down over Speak English email. Megan Lee Neely is, or was, an assistant professor of biostatistics and bioinformatics. She made the classic mistake of putting in writing a suggestion that Chinese students could improve their English if they commit to using English 100% of the time. She suggested there will be consequences in the students' professional lives if they chose to speak Chinese. She was investigated by Duke's Office of Institutional Equity. Professor Neely stepped down. Ridiculous. A clear overreaction on the part of the university. The professor was offering advice, and good advice. Do students really believe they can succeed to their full potential if they don't speak the language of the business and the country they are operating in? Do you think I could do this job if I didn't speak English? I've been advised to speak with a less extreme British accent, and it was good advice. I toned down the Englishisms and did well. Why would I be offended? Truth is, Professor Neely ran foul of the ultra-PC climate on our college campuses. It's destroying free speech and creating a generation of people who just can't handle the real world. Worse, it's changing our culture, changing our politics, enforcing an intellectual straitjacket that gets us nowhere. Joining me now for reaction is Duke Pesta. He's an associate professor of English at the University of Wisconsin. Duke, welcome back to the program. As I recall, you asked your students to sign a pledge that they wouldn't be looking for safe spaces or trigger warnings before they took your class. Am I right? That's what you did.
That's exactly right. Yes, and then most of them signed it, were happy to do so. They seemed to understand we couldn't have a class if we couldn't speak to each other.
OK, what do you... Look, I'm just ranting here about the idea that you can't give language advice to your students. Are you with me on this?
Yeah, it's worse than that, Stuart, I think, than the way you phrased it. She was writing that email, in part, Megan Neely, because other students had complained. This professor was in a difficult situation. On the one hand, students are complaining that these kids are only speaking Mandarin, right? And that they're doing it loudly and no one's able to hear this. What if those complaining students were themselves female students or other minority students? If Megan Neely had done nothing, she would have run afoul of them. So she was between a rock and a hard place. But her email was absolutely innocuous. And here's the thing that gets me, Stuart, that what she was basically asking these Chinese kids to do was to participate in inclusive language. If we think about how universities have sold their souls in the name of inclusivity, that's the reason for everything now, inclusivity. She was trying to get these kids to behave in an inclusive manner, and they still, her own university, still called her on the carpet and forced her to step down from her position as graduate director.
I find that absolutely astonishing. I think the professor was offering good, solid advice. I don't think she was doing anything wrong, but she stepped down. I mean, what on earth is Duke thinking here? I mean, do they really think that they're running a genuine university full of intellectual interest? Do they really think they're running that kind of institution, doing that kind of thing?
This is the kind of intellectual pressure, the bullying pressure that people feel on college campuses. Keep in mind, Stuart, that she is an assistant professor, which means she does not have tenure. My bet is that they warned her, and she voluntarily stepped down because she knew if she didn't, she would have a hard time getting tenure. Wow. This is what's happening with speech on college campuses. There are all sorts of institutional pressures. If you are an assistant professor, you better say nothing, you better do nothing that runs against the radical left-wing progressive norms here. You better conform, and if you find yourself in a position without tenure where you make this mistake, you better do a lot of mea culpas because they will not keep you down the road if you don't. And so I think Megan Neely stepping down certainly was the victim of institutional pressure, and these are the kind of forces that are at work in our monolithically progressive universities. It always goes one way.
Real fast, were you bullied after you asked your students to sign that contract, no trigger warnings, and, you know, don't take the class if you don't like it? Were you bullied?
Bullied in the sense that immediately one of the university administrators contacted my department head and demanded a copy of my contract to be forwarded to the legal system at UW-Madison so they could make sure I wasn't doing anything out of line. Now again, if I were a progressive and I had a very progressive syllabus about what you can and can't say, no administrator would have batted an eye. But because mine was the way it was, championing free speech, this had to go under institutional review to the highest levels of my university system.
Don't ever try to bully a guy whose nickname is Duke. Now, I think it's just as simple as that.
Well, maybe we need to change the name of Duke University. They're unworthy of that name.
Good one. Professor, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's my take. We'll see you tomorrow.